This is a story roughly based on a playthrough of Stalker Call of Pripyat with the big Call of Chernobyl mod. The footage is partially related, but most of it actually isn't, so there's no need to watch it, and indeed the footage may actually have small spoilers for the story, since I'm leaving myself leeway to change the order things happen and such. Now, on to part 1, covering the first day in the zone for some new arrivals. The moment I heard about the Wishgranter, I knew what I wanted. Me and my good friend Ro set out like it was another camping trip. It didn't matter if the Wishgranter wasn't real, or what other people would call real. It was a chance we couldn't pass up. Ro was so excited my poor old car couldn't take the shaking. "They'll kill you when you get there?" Ro asserted. "Yes, you too, I imagine," I replied, eyes on the damp road. "Doubt it," Ro shrugged. No elaboration given. That was Ro, immune to questions from the very beginning. It didn't stop raining the first day, and remained dull and cloudy the second. Ro said it was ash from Chernobyl still hanging in the air. I thought that was impossible, however we are forced to revise the definition of possible when it comes to the Exclusion Zone. ET ghosts wasted no time showing us that. "See that?" Ro said, pointing at the sky. "No," I said. I had my eyes as firmly on the road as my hands were on the wheel, trying to scan the tree lines between fields for army spies. In the growing dark I had little chance, although it did make the pink sky above the zone stand out. Ro tortured me into looking at it, at which point I brought the car to a halt in the middle of the road. The colour of the sky alone was a wonder of the world. It was like a strip of the finest sunset that got lost and tripped over in the northern sky. Over and over it fell, circling a stratospheric drain. It was an invitation to believe everything one had ever heard about the Exclusion Zone. It is hard to describe, and I'm not entirely sure that each person who viewed scenes like these even saw the same thing. "Do you know what that is?" Ro challenged. "A compass. We'll head that way on foot once we reach the spot," I said. "Be serious," Ro protested. "That stuff is important enough to think over. Let me explain it." "Alright," I said. Arguing was not an option. "The sustained energy from the disaster allowed ET to come through." "What? Who told you that?" "I remember I saw it on television." And here I thought you knew something I didn't. I remember plenty of talk about this on television." "Zedric says he saw it. He said it was true. Same thing I remember seeing." "No, it's all rubbish," I said as I refocused on the car and checked my notes on the map. "Rubbish? Oh, you say what you remember is the real story, and what I remember must be wrong." "That's roughly what I said, yes." "How dare you? The rest of the stuff, the gods and the noosphere, all the different kinds of rubbish you saw, it's all just invented by quacks and cultists. You're wasting valuable neurons remembering it." "Ah, I understand. Whereas your neurons, being of little value, might as well flow forth their pools of superior TV wisdom." Even though I was right, we bickered like this for the remainder of the drive. We were already beyond the last paved turnoff. The road ahead went only to the zone, so my clown car stuck out fearfully. Once we were a couple of miles from the border, I saw the dirt track that Zedric had whispered about in our last game. It went into the woods, and battered us with its ridges and troughs. I was too scared to turn the headlights on, preferring to crawl in the dark. A giant beetle returning to its nest, nothing more. Once I saw the final spot, I cursed myself for not listening to most of what Zedric had to say over the years. There really was a hidden parking lot here in the woods. There were 3 other cars there, all practically being swallowed by the mud. Rust raced to consume them first. Other vehicles must come and go, given the tracks. Vehicles with better wheels than my poor Yosefka. If she was to lie here forever, at least she would not be alone. I unpacked the camping gear and we went north. We used flashlights at first, then later the pink light from the zone was bright enough to see by. Soon we were at the edge of the woods. It was around 10 PM. We had thought about trying to go in at night, like so many others. From the very beginning it had been attempted and failed by thousands of thrill seekers. It was a different breed of person that actually got in, and an even leatherier bunch that came out one day to flog their fanciful rumours. The combined wisdom of 6 years of heroic crimes was to keep to business hours and give a warm smile when the patrols captured you. That was our plan, and the point when, as Roe had noted, I would probably be killed. Roe would fare no better, but just you tried telling them that. We slept in the tent. There was a rumbling from the zone, although it might have been thunder. I didn't go out to check. Once we'd packed away, we hiked north across overgrown fields. Roe had a dumb laugh at my expense, since the pink sky above the zone was gone. All was normal and boring today. I was forced to use the compass to keep our bearings, until it started spinning. Bah, hardly scary. Even the Bermuda Triangle can pull tricks like that. By then it was obvious where to go anyway, towards the tall fence fronted by destroyed vehicles. It was a chain-link fence with razor wire. Anything more expensive or permanent was a waste of time, given how the zone liked to move its boundaries now and again. There were wrecks of military armoured cars, helicopters, and endless empty plastic boxes, the flotsam of the last time the zone had decided to surge outwards. I wanted to stay and look them over, as there were many unique vehicle configurations that were no longer in service. I found an overturned helicopter with a spot-welded mount for something on its belly. Something big and heavy it must have been. A radar? Why would they go to all that trouble to mount a radar? Roe exploded at the suggestion. I think the answer was that we should probably focus on the task at hand. We shook hands with the fence. Zedric had already explained how to get over it. Become the salmon, he had said, voice echoing in his bottle. But do not forget that you are also a man. This sage advice was one of Zedric's poetic codes, designed deep in the forest of his mind to elude suspicion from the great listener. Don't worry, he was just a bit crazy. Still, I had not forgotten that I was a man, as instructed. This allowed me to perform tricks a mere salmon could not, to destroy a fence with the hot corruption of social constructs. How is that for poetry? I'll get to the point. A group of 3 men in uniform were walking towards us along the line of the fence. They appeared in no hurry to reach us. I prepared the money I had brought and left our bags wide open. The soldiers arrived, finishing their happy chat. They wordlessly noticed my rifle beside the bag and liberated me of it. Normally you can come right to the office on the road, a soldier said. He seemed friendly. He held out his hand and I gave him the wad. Okay, the deluxe holiday package. He nodded. The gang took all of our stuff and carried it back along the fence. You won't be able to keep all of this, it's too much, one commented. I asked why and was directed to ask again at the office. I had expected the soldiers to at least pretend we were trespassing, breaking some law, giving them a reason to beat us until the money came out. This operation had been running for many years, so I imagined they had learned by trial and error that the hotelier approach afforded the shortest time away from the television. We were taken to a red brick complex, remodeled from a farmhouse, I think. Here was the single red and white barrier that blocked the main road in, as if the exclusion zone were a parking lot. We were brought into the main building, which had almost no furniture and was hardly warmer than it was outside. Some soldiers acknowledged our presence with the full range of emotions a glare might indicate. At last, the man in charge appeared and inspected the camping stuff. "None of this is allowed," he declared. It sounded like we were supposed to know this already. That was the last I saw of my storied tent, soldiers taking it away to another plain-plastered room, from where the television sang of lost love. Another goodbye. Our weaponry and field gear was then arrayed for detailed inspection by several soldiers. The main attraction got quick attention. "He's got an SG-550, look," the soldier marveled. The officer snatched my prized rifle up and looked it over. "Where are you from?" he asked sharply. Mikolaev, I said. The officer scoffed, then put the weapon in my hands. The Poles are probably looking for this. No good against mutants. You need stopping power, handling, like this, he said, pointing to a soldier with a short-barreled AK variant. Confusingly, the soldier beside this one was leaning on a customized Dragunov that was almost as tall as him stock to barrel. For killing stalkers, the sniper said with a smug grin. Stalkers being the term used to refer to people like Roe and I, those whose hope for the world had sunk low enough to drag them into the zone. All supposed to be shot on sight by the fine fellows welcoming us. Even from the first day the army got here, that wasn't how it actually worked. I tried to explain I'd won my rifle in a card game, however they didn't seem to care. If the officer wasn't permitting them to steal it from me, then they wanted me over the fence and into danger as soon as possible. Roe had nothing they wanted, and pretty much said nothing the whole time, aside from muttered warnings about who had their fingers on their triggers. I didn't think Roe would even notice stuff like that. I was impressed. Don't waste any time once you're in there, the officer said. You should go to the village. It's here, you see. He was pointing at a map on the wall. We nodded. Roe would remember it for sure. You get your shit together there. They'll show you the work. They'll handle your pay. You're not allowed back here unless you want to be shot. The exception will be for 5 minutes. I'm gonna pay Dust Rat to not shoot you for each of those 5 minutes. If he cannot shoot you anymore after those minutes, you will not get shot. Not by us. Dust Rat was the toothy sniper. We packed up the gear into freshly emptied bags, then set off for our work. The soldier had mistaken us for lowlifes who came to the zone to get rich. That was Zedric, guys like that. They were called loners inside the zone. Lots of words meant different things inside the zone. We would learn it all soon. We were let out, and a clock somewhere started ticking, I suppose. The easiest way forward was the road. It went on northwards towards Pripyat, although taking the road itself would leave you dead within a mile. Why? The simplest way to put it is that ET did not think about our well-being when they blasted off. Their magic leaves death as the best case scenario. Worst case? You might have noticed the officer said something about mutants. There's no point approaching these questions too quickly, since they are endless. For now, know that we left the road to take a countryside path to the village from the map. We could still see the military outpost after 5 minutes, despite making an effort to jog. We were not shot at by Dustrat that morning. The zone's hinterlands were the unremarkable part. Abandoned farms and houses, rotten and ruined. The fields were not overgrown like on the outside. The ground was dead. Grass grew, because grass probably grows on the dark side of the moon. The rest of the plants we saw were desiccated. I will not say they were dead, but this wasn't the life they hoped for. "Welcome to the Exclusion Zone, stalkers!" A shout came through a megaphone. The village was up ahead. It was a huddle of single-floor workshops, cheaply made by the Soviets overseeing the place once upon a time, I'd bet. I waved and didn't see who had welcomed us. We kept going until we were face to face with men in green jumpsuits, gas masks, balaclavas, and covered in mud. Of course, they were armed to the teeth. "Who are you?" one asked. "Strelok," I said. "Roe," Roe said. "Come up with those yourself? We'll get you something better," someone said. The gifts of zone hospitality. They took us into the village. Grubbier stalkers were posted about, cooking on fires or moping in ruined shacks. They looked more like us, in civilian clothes. These were the rookies. The green guys were the retirees making a cut on their business here. The dirty business of hunting for shards of alien magic, then cashing it in. It was all bullshit, but if we'd just left, we wouldn't have lasted an hour. We were taken to a bomb shelter set aside from the buildings. I went first, descending steps bathed in yellow lights. ET must have been impressed at our power grid and left it working. I'm inclined to agree with them. "It's SG-550, the man at the bottom of the stairs declared. He had recognized the weapon from only the barrel poking up over my shoulder. He was sat behind metal bars and in front of stacks of crates. It gave off the impression of an inner city pawn shop from the good old days, and that's almost what it was. Stalkers were on guard in the background, heavily armed, and armoured with metallic gear I had never seen. Contrasting them was the shopkeep, an overweight, bald man in a tortured yellow button-up, hunched over the counter and peering up at us. He introduced himself as Sidorovich. "You want to kill someone?" he asked. When I didn't respond quickly, he pointed to the gun. "That's a weapon that's killed before, isn't it?" "We want to go to the power plant," Ro said. Yes, you must do," Sidorovich muttered. He leant back from the counter and looked for something underneath it. "Here in the zone, we have what they call a free market. If you don't want work, I won't give it to you. There will be someone else tomorrow. However, I have a sense of civic responsibility. I'm from the old days, you see." He brought out a device and pushed it through the slot in the bars. It was a Geiger counter. "It's free?" I asked, taking it without waiting for the answer. "Not free. Everything you own belongs to me when you die. That's the price. I see you've already accepted this contract." He smiled. 1 in 3 teeth were silver. "And don't worry, we will find you. So, the power plant, you said?" Ro nodded and added, "For the Wishgranter." I hadn't wanted to mention that yet. "Wishgranter, yes, very precious, that," Sidorovich said with stealthy sarcasm. "That is easy to find. In the power plant, that is correct. Simply set off north and you'll be there within a day. Makes me wonder what life must be like outside the zone for so many to come in here with the same wish. There are easier ways to die. I have pills for it here somewhere. You might as well leave my new possessions in the locker there." I judged that this was not going to be especially helpful, and turned to leave. Sidorovich had more to say. "The man I need you to kill will be in your way, comrades, and he will certainly try to kill you. Hell, I'd kill you for an SG-550. I looked back for another volley of the silver smile. We ended up listening to the whole thing. An hour later, I was focusing my binoculars on a railway bridge over the road north. It was missing its midsection, although an askew train carriage had kindly blocked the gap. Sandbag emplacements dotted the ridge this bridge and rail line formed. Enough about the looks of it, it was the sound that was more interesting. Gunfire. The ridge was controlled by soldiers, just as Sidorovich had warned. There was another fence with barbed wire running beside the tracks, funneling travellers into their outpost, or as it was today, their kill zone. Supposedly it was rare for them to be this aggressive. Sidorovich predicted that in a few weeks they would stop caring about whatever brought this violence on and start profiting again. We had the option of waiting, if we could beg for food. Ro decided quickly that we could not. So there we were, sharing 1 rifle and 1 pair of binoculars, watching a shootout. The opposing side was a gang of black-jacketed stalkers squatting in a mill, no more than 50 meters from the crossing at its closest point. Sidorovich wanted them dead too, but not today. He had contracted us, or me specifically, to kill the army commander at their base half a mile past this bridge. Like the good old days again. It sounded like a ridiculous task, but the senior stalkers patted me on the back for getting such easy work. There are 2 views on this, that their sarcasm was thick enough to stop a bullet, or that they were completely genuine. Ro and I rallied these views back and forth inconclusively. A couple of 100 meters to the left of the bridge, there was a tunnel. There were abandoned vehicles and litter there, but no soldiers. Ro said we could get through it, and I agreed. We set off in that direction. There was nowhere to hide along the way, squelching through soft, withered grass. Ro was ducking down while walking, until I told them to cut it out. The army could see us either way. We lived because the stalkers at the mill kept the troops hidden. "It's like they've got tunnel vision, so they can't see this tunnel," Ro noted when I explained it. "Does that satisfy you?" I asked. "I think so." "I'm smiling on the inside," I snarked. "I know." I wasn't smiling for much longer. We reached the mouth of the tunnel. It stank. There were several dead animals, I suppose you could say. Mutants. 3 mounds of overgrown flesh lay, almost round, although not flatly. Each was as large as a man curled up. It could have been a pig, inflated at the stomach, skin thinned out so that its outermost form was more of a film around ugly mountains of pale flesh. We weren't eager to stand there so close to the skirmish, so one fear drove us into the claws of another. "They're dead," I claimed. "Look at the faces," Ro said. The faces were bad. Each mound had a face that could have been human, before uneven growth took hold. It was an imitation of the kind that would draw deep contemplation if unleashed upon a portrait gallery. An image of all man is, or all it might as well be without its reason, without its excellent husbandry of illusions. Yes, if the dead face of this disgusting creature was at all human, we should wish to be an imitation of it. I told Ro to shut up and move. Ro skirted the 3 carcasses to the tunnel mouth. I moved slower. The bodies had not bled, I thought, scanning the dirt. I was wrong. It came at us from above. Claws raked at me, crossing my chest, painless for the moment. A mud-coloured humanoid monster with tentacles decorating its face, like flower petals as Ro later put it. It thrust forward as I stumbled back, then it was gone. It disappeared before my eyes. I shushed Ro as they asked what it was. I could hear it. It was pacing around me, invisible aside from the scribbles of movement in the dirt. I brought my rifle up, feeling the first pain. I turned around and saw the thing rematerialize for its back attack, only now my rifle barrel was there to meet it. I pulled the trigger and held it. I had a 30-round magazine, and most of them hit. It had turned to flee by the end, making it 2 steps before it fell and rolled over. It bled cartoonishly as it squirmed. Ro handed me the next magazine. I fired every shot at it as well. Then it stopped moving. I looked over my shoulder back towards the bridge. Certainly we had gained their attention with this outburst. Then pain swallowed me and I fell to my knees. I shuffled like this towards the concrete wall holding back the earth at the tunnel mouth. Ro was already going for the first aid kit, so I let them take care of it. It took all of our bandages to cover the area that was bleeding. Fortunately, the claws didn't get much deeper than my ruined jacket. Our changes of clothes had been confiscated, so I had to put it back on after, dripping red. The kit had painkillers, serious ones, which I took despite the risks. It was agony to move, so we sat there for a while to recover, even though the army might appear on the ridge above us at any moment. There was still shooting around the mill, 1- and 2-shot bursts, with long bouts of silence between. I could see the thing I'd killed still erupting blood into the growing pond it fed. "I didn't notice it," Ro said, head shaking. "They warned us it would be like this," I said. There had been words about dangerous mutants in the village. It was the least dangerous part of the zone, they had said as a sweetener. The sky-sized whir of a helicopter began to grow. With the binoculars I could see one coming in low from the south, roughly towards us. "It won't see us," Ro claimed. We probably looked dead anyway. I checked the bag and the rifle. 2 more magazines, stamped with their original NATO IDs. This could be enough to barter our way back out. "Can we do this?" I asked Ro. "You want to go back?" was the counter-question. Back? I don't even know what we'd go back to. "Please, we have to make it. We need that wish," Ro said softly. "It's worth dying for." "Yeah, I'm glad you think so too," I said. Ro had an easy smile. "It's real. People get their wishes granted all the time." No idea where Ro pulled that claim from, and there was no time to ask. 2 loud explosions commenced a long whooshing crash. The mill's tallest section slumped over, beginning even before we heard the sound. Then the heavenly patter of the helicopter's rotary cannon resounded. The craft was an Mi-24 with the crocodile camouflage pattern. Gun looked to be quad-barrel Yak B, remote-controlled and slung under the nose. "Those men are dead. We're moving," I said. The memories the scene awoke had me on my feet immediately. I pulled Ro into the tunnel. The other side was no more than 30 meters ahead, clear as the cloudy day. Some construction materials had been dumped inside, and a flatbed truck with no wheels slumbered at the other end. I had the gun ready for more beasts. Something felt wrong. Ro started screaming, echoing loud. The colour in the world withdrew, and I saw Ro's petrified expression in shades of grey and blue. I grabbed Ro and drove us forward toward that flatbed. "It hurts! It can find me!" Ro screamed. The sound of the helicopter peering low into the mill covered up this racket nicely. I felt something touching my brain. No better way to put it. Whatever was happening, it stopped on the other side of the tunnel. I hadn't felt any pain. Ro was reeling in agony. Something in my thoughts," Ro managed to say. "Yeah, it was in my thoughts too," I said. "Honestly, I think. E.T. This is way too hot. We've got to keep going. See the farm there?" We were at the foot of a gentle hill with white walls at the top. It was a farm, according to the map back in the village. Another hub for Sidorovich's Death Oath stalkers. Ro couldn't calm down, so I dragged them onwards. This side of the ridge was different to the other. First weird thing, that flatbed was in great condition, no rust, clean paint. Likewise, the trees here were leafy and tall, growing alone in otherwise barren soil. Trunks of felled trees lay right beside fully grown ones. A brief glance at the knots and branches made the magic clear. They were the same trees, living and dead. I looked back to the tunnel. We had passed into the zone proper, the part where things did not have to follow our earthly laws. Ro's terror was starting to get to me though. It was true, what they were mumbling over and over. It wanted to kill me. Yes, at any moment I or Ro could be killed by the ETs, and we would fail. That must have been one in the tunnel. It didn't seem to follow us, if that was even possible. Nothing had changed from before. The solution to these new problems was the same as the old: reach the Wishgranter. Mentioning that got Ro to slow down. They said they didn't feel the pain anymore, and I wished I could say the same of my scratches. The continuing sound of the helicopter's droning gun from the other world put wind in our sails, up the hill to the farm. It was a more tightly knit cluster of buildings than the village, fortified with walls of debris and amateur carpentry to leave only one entrance. There were stalkers on the roof, the heavily geared up kind. They saw us coming and pointed for us to go around to the east side. No hint of hostility. I think we looked the part, like Sid's freshest dumb rookies. There we met the road up from the bridge crossing. Were it not for the curve of the hill, we would have been able to see the crossing. The stalkers up there on the roof could see all the action, their binocs up and down like they were cuckoo clock figures. We passed a wooden gate into the courtyard. I think it was a stables once. We were pressed for information immediately, as everyone was anxious about the fighting. It was unusual for such attacks to be carried out, which was good news to some extent. The helicopter in particular was an expensive touch. Someone really high must have found out, one stalker told us. Or they got screwed on a deal for some rare artifact, another offered. A spy plane, one sitting by a fire, claimed. It flew across the sky 3 days ago. They saw everything, all of us. Military is in deep shit now. Two Grips thinks everything he sees in the sky is a machine. In the zone, the others laughed. Real names were a rarity here, and I felt stupid even for giving my nickname to the guards. When they asked for my name in the farm, I said Zig, and held up my rifle, SIG Maker's Mark. The older guys laughed. Ro still said Ro, with a daring tone. An invincible name indeed. "You've fallen on hard times to come selling those things door to door, Mr. Zig," a guy in a gas mask said. His name was Grasshopper. He took me aside and offered me a bottle of vodka, the whole bottle. Ro quickly bagged it and said thanks. Grasshopper seemed coolly disinterested in the battle the rest of the stalkers were rubbernecking at. Instead, he explained a few things, such as why he carried an oxygen tank on his back, 3 Geiger counters, and something called an echo detector. He could tell we were new without a word. There are places in the zone you can go safely, he lectured. And then one day, you'll go there like any other day, and the car you always used to pass, the tree you carved your mark in, they'll be burning hotter than the reactor itself. The next day, the fire is gone, but the car and the tree have switched places, or come to life, or decide to be made of lightning. I know it sounds like just scary stories, but it's stuff like that which gets people killed. Probably because it's weird places like that the aliens hide their swag, the big money items. I asked what these items were, and Grasshopper came across as aghast in his echoing mask. He laughed when I said Sidorovich didn't tell me already, or that I didn't come into the zone to look for them. Artifacts, that's what we say, like it's an old pot, a find, a souvenir, makes for great paperwork at the cordon. They're pieces of magic. I can't really tell you what they're like because they're all different. You want to see one? Ro came forward and more or less demanded to see one. Grasshopper opened a pocket on the front of his olive jumpsuit. There was a tear-shaped stone, bright blue, like the sky seen through a wisp of cloud. Ro immediately reached for it, but Grasshopper pulled the pocket closed and barked a warning. It would kill you if you held it anyway, he added. I asked what this magic item did. Keeps me alive when the boys are ticking away, he said. The ET loves radiation. Why do you think they came here? I signalled for Ro to not begin a tirade on this topic. The sound of the helicopter was getting quieter, and the shooting had stopped. I told Grasshopper about Sidorovich's orders. That old man has the best ideas. We've all been stuck here for a long time, he lamented. Army blocked the best way north, and the other way, over there. He gestured vaguely towards the west. It's got ETs all over it. You saw an alien? Ro asked. No. You came through that tunnel. Did you see one? Grasshopper mocked. Ro shut up. Needs magic to fight smagic. That's why you see the real stalkers don't go scalping their finds to the cordon, or doing anything the old fatty doesn't come out of his cage to tell you about. Problem is the ET shit has rules, changing every day same as the zone. A ghost falls out of bed somewhere on the other side of Pripyat, and suddenly you die, cause some snail shell you pocketed was actually an ET superweapon. Now, welcome to the zone. We need to get to the Wishgranter, Ro suddenly said. Grasshopper groaned and began pulling a pack of cigarettes from his pocket, then reversed the move. You should just go back outside if that's what you're here for. Kill your way out if you have to. Nothing for you here. It's not real, Ro pressed. Didn't say that. No one gets there, that's the rule. Although since it's the zone, people end up there from time to time somehow. One rule that never breaks, no one comes back. In fact, the more people that go, the harder it gets. You heard about the brain scorcher? I shook my head. Grasshopper looked me up and down, then took his leave of us. Even if you're the world's #1 badass, which you probably think you are, you ain't got anything you need, he said. We followed him over to the fire, prompting him to go on. If you're going north, do it before those chumps get back from taking PR photos at the mill. The checkpoint's still guarded. If we hear gunfire, me and the boys will sneak over at night and see if you're still alive. If that scratch hasn't doomed you already. He waved me away, and seeing this dismissal, the other stalkers around the fire made a point of ignoring us. Me and Ro went to rest in our own corner for a while. I felt the painkillers beginning to falter. One drab-looking guy came over and asked if the tunnel was safe to use. I said we'd battled a creature, and the guy said it was a bloodsucker. Rare for these parts, or it was yesterday at least. His miserable voice rubbed off on us, so I was glad to see him trudge away again. The stalkers at the gate were arguing about whether it was safe to leave. 3 eventually did so, and returned within 10 minutes, dragging a dead boar. The army had shot it on the road, they cheered. The whole farmyard crew gathered around it and began arranging a spit over the largest campfire. We should leave quickly, like he said, Ro advised. You that eager to get into trouble, we might have to kill someone to go further, I said. You've done it before. You can do it again, Ro said with an earnest nod. Yeah. You just stay back and don't look, I said. I stood up. The painkillers were making their departure well known. What that green guy was saying means the Wishgranter is definitely real, Ro reminded me. And nothing's gonna stop us, right? Nothing. I can bear it. Then we're getting into this. I checked over the 550, then walked to the gate, Ro sticking behind me now. That way's closed, the stalker guarding the gate shouted when he saw us heading north. Bring our bodies back if we die, Ro replied with a faux friendly wave. The stalker let out some curses, yet rapidly decided he didn't care anyway. We kept off the road and followed it via the old-growth woods running beside it. It led to a narrow valley with steep slopes and barbed wire, funneling us towards a concrete compound with a metal gate. The gate was open, and a soldier stood by it, smoking. I opened the vodka and drank. Ro didn't want any. A soldier with a blue beret came out and said something to the guard. Then both went back inside. I moved off, leaving Ro behind in the woods. I paced along the side of the road, ready to return to the trees at a moment's notice. The way the gate hung open meant I had to cross to the sparsely covered side to get a view in. I did so smoothly. Quickly I was up against the concrete wall. It had no wire on top, and climbing over it wasn't out of the question. Still, an open gate moves things along. At that point I had still not decided if I was actually going to kill those men. Had I been alone, I think I could have slipped past. However, Ro would not come close, fearing a violent outcome. This then meant violence was the only way forward for us both. It was easy. I glided around the gate with the rifle shouldered. The officer and the soldier were standing right there, throwing sticks into a pile for a fire. The officer got out a syllable before I shot. The other guy scrambled to hide behind a parked armoured car. I cursed and dodged to hide at the other end. "Who are you?" the soldier called. I said nothing. He'd have his rifle ready by now. It was an AK-74, with its wooden finishings painted black. At this range, the advantage was his. I blind fired down the vehicle and considered lying down to shoot his feet if I could see them. Then I had a better idea. "Now, outflank him!" I shouted to my right, towards a pile of crates. Praying the soldier would look that way, I lunged to appear from the other side of him. It worked. I came around the back of the armoured car and shot the soldier several times. He didn't fall over and stumbled away. I pulled the trigger, but my magazine was already empty. My count was completely off. I followed him behind the single tall tree in the tiny compound's yard, gradually fitting the final magazine into the 550. He didn't seem to notice me following, looking shocked when he turned around. I apologized and delivered 5 more shots into his chest. He fell over at last. The building beside us had 1 story, 3 rooms, no doors. It was empty. I went to the gate and waved for Ro, then hastened inside again to see if their shelves had what I needed. My spoil of battle was a first aid package with more painkillers and bandages. I squared them away and prepared to leave quickly, although Ro was more interested in the 2 bodies. The stalkers should have done this themselves, Ro concluded. I agreed and said that I would not do it again. I'll help you if you want, Ro said. I know it's hard to resist being in here. I did this for you, I said back. I know. Good work. Me and Ro had a tough time with this sort of thing a long time ago. While this outburst of murder may seem sudden to you, it was unemotional and routine for us, albeit a routine we'd been out of for as long as we could manage. This was breaking the rules, but it was as we had both agreed, anything to reach the Wishgranter. Nothing else mattered at all. The gate to exit the compound was unlocked. A road rose gently upwards as the valley sides mellowed, the trees thinning out to be replaced with a landscape of abandoned vehicles of all descriptions. It was similar to what we'd seen outside the border fence, only the vehicles were modern variants. This had clearly been the border once, until the zone decided to claim new territory in a violent outburst. Flashy events like this had happened several times, and it always made the news. The last one was a year ago, producing rainbow skies and ghost hurricanes spinning harmlessly out across Europe. There was a lot more for us to learn about this on the inside. At the top of the hill was a military depot, surrounded with remaining fragments of a razor wire fence. 30 or so tanks and armoured infantry fighting vehicles were parked neatly, ranging from factory fresh to being tank-shaped charcoal. There was a helicopter in pristine condition parked right in the middle, a prize for the taking. But we could see why no one had done so. All around it the air was shaking, like it was a liquid. In the same way a fish produces ripples in water, something was disturbing space with irregular jabs, bending the very light rays reaching my binoculars. This, we learned quickly, was by far the most common method of predation for the aliens. Looking at it made everything you saw afterwards change colour for a few seconds. It was quite entertaining. Roe said they couldn't see any difference. We stayed here for too long. The Mi-24 came up behind us full tilt. We dashed to get off the road. This road curved around to the right, slithering behind a tall bluff covered in debris. Destroyed buildings mixed into mud, I believe. We darted left, following the bluff westwards. There was a series of electrical pylons that came down over the bluffs and marked a trail through another pass, a route to who knows where. The helicopter reached the spot we'd been loitering on. We decided to run. We must have been visible to it. It was a few hundred meters away, with clear sightlines. I heard the rotary cannon fire a burst. Nothing hit the ground around us as we ran. I looked back. It was pointing right at us. It fired a few bursts more, achieving nothing. A glance offered me some explanation. The shots were flashing out of existence above the haunted depot. Somehow it carried on this way, as if the pilot was unaware. We didn't see what happened next clearly, hearing the helicopter's engine pitch up like the sound was being crushed through a straw. It flew straight up into the sky with a trail of yellow, fiery specks in pursuit. After slowing down and looking with the binoculars, I confirmed it was leaving the scene. The fiery specks were gone. The zone breathed out, and peace returned. Roe wanted to go back the way we came, thinking it was north. I thought it was east. Our compromise was to go forwards, making no speculatory stabs at what direction this was. It was peaceful and green in the gullies, making the recent mortal peril lose its grip. We came to an area with more trees, where the path meandered from the gully between two piles of debris and then out into an open space. There was a tarmac road here that subducted into one of the piles. The other end of it was coming from an eyesore of an industrial complex at the base of a hill, shielded from view by a perimeter wall. That was where the electrical cables were going. A quick scan with the binoculars revealed smoke and lights. Asking for directions was risky. Not doing so, also pretty risky. We ended up taking a rest in the relative privacy of a clutch of bushes. There was another barbed wire fence close by, preventing passage one way. The other way, more of those debris walls blocked view, and probably passage. I suspected the factory complex was extended over a much larger area. Pieces of a railway were sticking out of the mounds in places. We were stuck right there, with various places we could try to go, and the certainty of further danger anywhere but in our bush. So we sat there and enjoyed the peacefulness of this hard-earned scene. It was the kind of peace unique to the zone. No birdsong, no wind, a mortifying silence. Admittedly, there were little ticks of noise now and again, gunfire from distant corners of the nightmare, and there was Roe. "We got further than they said we would," Roe proudly nodded. "I don't think this is the right way. We need to go..." I consulted the compass, and it frustratingly pointed right over the top of those rubble piles. North. I got the binoculars and looked for a decent way around. I got a look at a watchtower on the edge of the factory complex and identified several soldiers. Too clean and underprepared looking to be stalkers, and too well equipped to be rookies like us. The zone was packed with such rocks and hard places. I returned to Roe and took off my jacket to replace the bandages on my chest. The old ones were bloody on the front and sweaty on the back. I decided not to take the painkillers again to keep my mind in order. Then, jacket neatly folded beside me, there was a growl. Not the breathy, understated growl of the bloodsucker. It was a hum, an angry moan. A man emerged from the copse we had run through. He was dressed in pea-green scrubs and was running on all fours. This was natural for him, as his arms were long, longer than his legs. Otherwise, he was certainly a man, bald, plain-faced, bored-looking. He moaned again and turned to approach us. His four-limbed gallop accelerated. I grabbed the 550 and took aim, not standing up. Ro was panicking uselessly, asking if I could hear it. I fired at the man, the thing, and a few bullets later it ploughed into the patchy grass, tangled in those limp ropes of arm. That wasn't the end of it. Behind it were running more of those fleshy, pig-bodied, man-faced creatures. They were slower, and paid no attention to us, fleeing towards the factory until they were almost out of sight. Then they returned, not by their own will. It was like they had been caught on a fishing line and were being reeled back the way they came, only it was precisely the uneven route they had taken, a reel back in space and time. Neither of us really knew what we were seeing. It made me feel sick, strangely. When they had almost faux retreated back out of sight, parts of the bodies flashed back to where they were supposed to be. Others remained locked on the invisible hooks. A fatal separation, one that confirmed those creatures ordinarily had plenty of blood to spill. Then, gunfire. I lay down and signalled for Ro to copy me. It was only a few shots, but they were very close. They had a bright pallet to their crack, fired through a suppressor. They came from right behind us. I rolled over to look and prayed that my magazine wasn't empty. On the other side of the barbed wire fence, a man covered crown to toe in black armour arose from his stomach with a VSS Vinterez shouldered. He was waving his hand at us to stay down and looking past us. I didn't fire. His armour was metallic, like the stuff I'd seen someone wearing in Sidorovich's lockup. He fired one more time, then barked an order to advance. Nearby, two guys appeared from other bushes. Just how many people were hiding here? Both of these guys were dressed like walking tanks, same as the first. That first guy rolled through the barbed wire and came over to us. "Good shooting, Stalker," he said. His voice had an electronically altered sound, his armour working to get the words from the inside to the outside. He had army patches on his arm. He pointed to the dead long-arm man to pin his compliment. I asked what happened, a thought said aloud more than anything. The armour guy told me to look at his teammates. They were dragging a black-coated figure from the very copse we'd passed through. This captive was short, 2/3 of a man's height, making up for it with bloated width. The super soldiers threw him to the ground. The fall of the black coat now revealed orange skin, recognizable as skin only because it was arranged in a humanoid shape. In isolation, it looked more like crumbling stone. "You've never seen one of those before, have you?" the guy boasted. I said we hadn't. I didn't know how screwed we were, but since I was lying topless on the ground with a near-empty gun, and Ro was hardly any better, I was at their mercy. Turns out these dudes had mercy to spare. The main one introduced himself as Krieger, announcing his rank as lieutenant, yet quick to explain he and his pals were not from the military. "I thought those loners explained it all to newbies," he said to me. "It's pretty easy. There are good guys and bad guys, don't overthink it. We're from duty. We protect the world from the zone, and that means people like you, and it means people like them." He gestured towards the factory, the military. "Because there are things here that can destroy this world. Today, there is one less." He nodded to the corpse. He called it a bureau. "They didn't come out during the day," he said. "Or yesterday they didn't," Ro chipped in. Krieger laughed and praised our understanding. Then he sighed, which produced a garbled mess through his electronics. He asked where I'd met a bloodsucker after glancing at my wounds, and I told him the whole thing. "There is usually less fighting. Your rampage might calm things down, so thanks," he ultimately said. He helped me with the bandages and applied better ones from his own stash. I was very aware of how easily he could kill me, and how I couldn't even be sure if he was human under that suit. He explained that Duty, a crew of 100, were the protectors of the zone, unofficially. Ex-army, ex-stalker, ex-pert. They wanted everyone to leave the place alone, to minimize the trouble this boil on the planet's surface was likely to cause. They were probably the sanest guys in here. Ro looked at me. I shook my head. Then, Ro asked it anyway. "What do you know about the Wishgranter?" Krieger waved his guys over to watch him interrogate us as to where we heard about such a thing. "People talk about it everywhere outside," Ro said. Krieger seemed oblivious to the fantastical rumours the world peddled about the zone. Most were less dumb than the Wishgranter, and less true to boot. "What about Sidorovich? What did he tell you?" Krieger pressed. I insisted that everyone else said either nothing or told us to shut up about it. This calmed all three of the dutiers down. "People try to go to the power plant to see that thing," he grumbled. "And it causes the colossal messes that we have to clean up. 'Cause if we don't, everyone's dead. That's Duty. Look at him, the Bureau. Think he killed those flesh to eat them? He don't eat. He needs a release, to kill something, anything. If you fall asleep, he'll tear the brain right out through your ears to give himself a moment's inner peace. And there's a lot more where he came from. That's the shit that starts when people try to fuck with the Wishgranter. Although this guy's probably from the underground. Been chasing those flesh all day. You look like you have no idea what's going on here, and your instinct is right. So forget anything about a Wishgranter. You promise?" It felt childish to be pretending to make this promise, but we did it. "If you're lying, it would be better to kill you now," Krieger threatened. "I'm not lying," Ro lied. "Lieutenant, it's hard to explain, but those stories about the Wishgranter are important to us," I said slowly. "If you came here for stories, you're an idiot," he replied. "You should go meet up with the guys who tried to find it last time." "What? Who's that?" Ro perked up like a dog. "Scientists, I suppose you could call them. Actually, the real scientists all got killed trying to get their wish. They're called Clear Sky. If you can read, their students might take you and tell you how it all happened. We leave them alone for now, since they might just make honest stalkers out of shipwrecks like you. They'll be impressed that you've killed people already. They lack that kind of macho. Tell them Duty recommended you. Here." He reached into a fold in his armor and produced a bullet. It was a long red cartridge. "Now, fuck off," he concluded without further explanation. He pointed to the fence he had knocked over, then took his boys to see the Bureau. "What was he talking about?" Ro asked. "Sounds useful. That way," I said. Ro pulled me up and we went over to the fence. It was bent out of shape enough for us to get over without much snagging. We entered a green field, flat and empty. Looking back, the dutiers were digging a hole beside that Bureau with tiny shovels. We hiked forward. We crossed 3 dead fields with ditches in between. There was rotten clothing strewn about, and bones in the ditches. Ro suggested we move on quickly, and I agreed. After the 3rd field was a wall of grey ballast, another railway track, or probably the same one from the broken bridge. That would be to our left, past shallow hills. To our right we could see a parked train. In front, the ballast ridge descended onto a hillside that carried on down quite a ways to a swampy mire. This was pretty much all there was to see. I thought that the zone boundary should still be visible from here, then revised that after a sweep with the binoculars. Lakes, marsh, and tall clumps of brown reeds. What had that Duty guy been pointing us at? Well, there were some clues. There were metal towers here and there, too blurry to say much about. Ro noticed that the train nearby was sitting beside a load of signs, a rail crossing. therefore a road. We walked down the tracks and checked the train out. Looted. The road was being reclaimed by the land. It had to go to the factory we'd seen one way, and the other way ran down the hill and right into a grey-blue lake. Didn't see anything man-made emerging from the reeds on the other side. While looking, something caught my eye. A few hundred meters further down the track was a roiling mess, the alien tendrils disturbing space again. Nothing really to write home about in the zone, even if it was impressive the first couple of times. The new part was a pair of figures, one orange, one green, standing in the swamp looking at it. They had full-face helmets with tinted glass, like radiation suits. It was hard to overlook that everyone else wandering the zone was more prepared than us. I let Ro take a look, and we agreed to ask them about Clear Sky. They looked like scientists, or something. Didn't see any weapons either. We walked closer, sticking to the raised railway, waving in what might get interpreted as a friendly way. About halfway there, they had clearly noticed us, one pointing us out to the other. They seemed more concerned with something on the ground, though. It looked like a camping stove. We stopped, since getting much closer would mean approaching the vicinity of the space-time fluctuations. Their ghostly movements were making an audible sound, a whoosh. It was like a big wave crashing on a rock, although visually nothing so dramatic was happening. Ro had an idea. They picked up a bit of ballast from between the rails and hurled it towards the aliens with a robust overarm spin. The aliens tried to catch it. One of the rippling auras moved into its path and burst with an orange light. The stone was repulsed and made it about halfway back to us. "Was I supposed to catch it?" Ro asked me. The two guys, orange and green, were screaming at us. Their arm flailing indicated that we'd made a mistake, even though I thought the idea of playing catch with these alien ghosts, or whatever, was a charming game. I would rather think about that than most of what had happened to us so far, and knew Ro would too. At least we knew those things were alive in some way. To the scientists, that was old news. They ended up circumventing the danger zone to come over to us. We descended the railway and met them down on the soggy ground. "Loners can't come here without a pass," the orange suit said. "How did you get past the train cars?" the green suit said. Their voices were muffled and plastic. "A guy from duty told us to come here," I said, hoping that earned some legitimacy. I flashed the red bullet. Didn't get any comment on it. "Are the anomalies at the train cars gone?" the green suit demanded to know. In response, I just blabbed everything, hoping for some sympathy. I even showed off my bandages. "Forget the train cars, we'll go there next time," the orange suit said. The green suit was unhappy with this, although on the verge of arguing, remembered their little device on the ground beside the aliens and ran back to it. "You are Clear Sky?" Ro asked. "No, but we are going that way. They bailed on us because of the weather," Orange said. "Weather's fine," Ro shrugged. "Technically speaking, yes. However, they have their own theories on how it works." "How what works?" "The zone's broader behavior. I suppose you're experienced in the use of that weapon?" He was nodding towards my expensive, near-empty 550. Still packed a mean punch if you swung it hard enough. These guys, Champ, orange, and Boa, green, paid us a handful of painkillers wrapped in 1,000 rubles to escort them to Clear Sky's hideout, which was exactly the opposite way I'd expected the transaction to go. Their device was measuring the strength of the alien pulses nearby. I asked why they needed to do this, and they dryly referred me to their superiors in the Institute of Extraterrestrial Cultures. I had heard of them in many jokes. I suppose there had to be something real at the bottom of it all. "Are you trying to figure out how to talk to them?" Ro asked. "They don't want to talk to us," Champ moaned. "They aren't like that." "So, what are they like?" "Obviously we have the answer to that question, don't we? We're just out here for fun, we are," Boa ranted. "Let's keep it quiet," I suggested. On cue, a sound appeared to fill the gap. The Mi-24 came sweeping overhead. Did the army come out here? I asked. They've taken over the remains of the town in the middle of this blighted place, Champ said. Probably just resupply. Come on. We navigated around the pools and reed beds, passing campsites, buildings being eaten by the mud, and forever bothered by the buzzing helicopter browsing the swamp. Now and again it fired its rotary gun at unseen targets. So much shooting today. Something's going on. Spore and Dump were right, huh? Boa said. We'll be out in 2 days. Focus on that, Champ said back. They know something we don't. The zone must have expanded again, Boa claimed. It hasn't. We were outside it yesterday, Ro said. Gods, people still come to this place willingly, even when most of the artifacts you can find kill you. We'll leave if you prefer, Ro taunted, and I told them to shut up. You may have noticed how many times a day I attempted to get Ro to do this. Anyway, we walked slowly for an hour. We stopped when the helicopter got very close to crouch in the reed beds. Another time we heard animals moving nearby. Boa whispered it was a boar. Champ revealed a dirty Makarov he kept in a beaten-up tin box on his belt. He was probably an alien under the mask. Nothing came of it, and we kept walking. The swamp became a little more open-topped, with no trees, withered reeds, and a firmer footing between the pools. Stepping close to a pool got Sidorovich's Geiger counter ticking. At least it worked. Champ and Boa bickered about the probability of rain. I took Ro back a little for a quiet word. When we get there, I think we should follow a certain strategy, I said. That's your speciality, bro, Ro replied, sounding tired. Yeah, we're not going to talk about the Wishgranter at all. Did you forget why we're here? It's better if no one knows. What makes you think that? Everything that's happened today makes me think that. You know I'm right. Sure, you're right, I bet. But it don't feel like it. Feel bad quietly then, until we're ready. How long's that gonna take? What if something happens again? Then we'll survive it, because we were ready. Quite the plan. Why are you mocking me? Is anything I said wrong? No, not really. So, let's hurry up and kill these guys, take their suits, and go north. Damn it, Ro. I'm in pain here. I'm joking. You were the one who considered it first. Don't look at me. Much do I gotta pay you to shut up? You don't have enough, and you never will. Thanks for the backup. My pleasure, bro. Bro? Don't like it? No. Huh. Somehow, we reached an agreement to stop blabbing about the Wishgranter like it was some theme park ride, and got to grips with the fact we were marching through a dreary swamp, flooded with radioactive waste, moving south instead of north, most likely. Compass was now doing its own thing, and my sense of direction was sliding this way and that with all the shit we'd been going through. There was a sudden brightening of the sky, as if the endless reams of cloud had given us a break. It wasn't coming from the sun, though. "Shit!" came Champ's muffled shout. We hurried to catch up, heads springing back to look at the bright yellow light on the horizon behind us. Clear Sky fucking knew it! They let us come here! Boa was ranting. Forgetting about us, the two suits started running. I waved for Ro to do the same. "What's happening?" I called out after them. "We've got to get inside," Champ replied. Ro and I caught up to them. The suits were slow, and ended up jogging along at their side. Ro said that something very bad was about to happen. We had to stick with the two crayons though, since they knew where we were going. That said, a minute later I noticed a crane station ahead, probably for boats. Now it was just sitting there in the swamp, being used as the foundation for a hut of salvaged lumber. Its second floor was open-sided, with an electric searchlight. It shone right at us. The shouts on the radios leaked out of the scientists' suits. Meanwhile, the yellow light in the sky had grown to be far larger and bigger than the sun, impossible to look at. The rest of the sky turned red and orange, and the air began to shudder and quake in our ears, louder and louder, as if a huge wave were about to crash upon us. It made me feel like the ground was shaking, although I'm pretty sure it was just my ear bones being taken for a spin. The yellow light started flashing, filling the whole sky with blinding energy. All 4 of us were cursing for all we were worth, even if staying silent might have let us run faster. Didn't we have to let the world know what we thought of this new development? Boa was rapping out endless Portuguese verse. My nerve broke and I sprinted forward to reach the crane station first. Ro was right with me. There was a wooden gangplank to get up there, and we stamped up it with our eyes almost closed. The light was pulsing, as the air felt like it was fresh out of an alien hairdryer. 2 men in blue camouflage ushered us into the shack. Ro fell over in the doorway and got a laugh from those inside. It was a cramped bunkhouse with 4 beds, a table, and a dozen stalkers standing shoulder to shoulder. Some planks in the walls were missing, so the hot air and dazzling lights joined us inside. The stalkers seemed calm. Most wore those blue camouflage suits, and a couple wore black military attire. All were armed with assault rifles. 4 of them in the corner were dividing up a big, spotty sausage. Champ and Boa piled in, and the door was closed. This brought the inside levels from about 60% to maybe 65%. The roaring apocalypse was clearly visible through the gaps in the wall, yet no one else was interested in it. "You have cigarettes?" someone asked me. I said no. That was the wrong answer. I slid out the vodka bottle instead, and got a lukewarm welcome to the swamp station. The rumbling seemed to subside. The sky was pink and orange, less bright now, but being kneaded this way and that, mixing the clouds and producing a throbbing in my head. I wondered if Ro was feeling it any worse than me, and noticed that they were blank-faced and completely stiff. I asked if things were alright, and got a modest nod. The thrumming sound of reality being crunched up and unfurled mixed into the sound of sausage-slicing negotiations. Unable to bear it, I shakily asked, "Are we okay in here?" One of the blue stalkers with a thick vest of armour, his name was Dumpling, said that we were. Another detail Sidorovich had skipped was that this kind of thing happened a lot. It was only harmful if you were outside. Scientifically speaking, I think the interior of the hut could still classify as outside. Cheers to the aliens for having very different science to us then, right? "Are you clear, Sky?" I asked. Dumpling nodded. "Is this your base?" This got a big laugh and angry retorts from the various corners. It was loud. About 15 men were standing in a space about 2 arm spans across both ways. Curiously, no one was lying on the 4 stacked bunks in the corner. I was about to ask about that when one of the black-armored guys ordered everyone to shut up. 2 seconds later, everyone had their weapons in hand. There were some faint footsteps. "On the roof," someone said. An assault rifle burst was directed at the ceiling. Ro and I ducked down. I could see someone up there. "How many?" someone shouted out. Then the loud rattle of a deathbed AK accompanied explosions of splinters all along the wall with the bunks. Someone was shooting in. Stalkers were hit and spanned to the floor by the force of their panicked searching. I took up the 550. I saw someone out there, a skinny, bald head looking through the gap in the wall. The others were firing at the ceiling and out of the now open door. I fired at that head. 4 bullets, 1 hit. The head slumped out of view, but through the gaps in the planks I could see the guy scrape along the wall towards the door. Bad things were happening in that door. Everyone was blasting everywhere, and whoever was trying to get in had put half the stalkers on the ground. Ro was a statue. Champ and Boa were bellowing on the floor. The attacker came in. He was similar to the guy I shot, thin and pale, looked dead. He was holding an AK at the hip. It was empty, and he didn't seem to understand that. I finished my ammunition putting him down, and quickly picked up an AN-94 from the bloody guy next to me. The guy I shot through the wall was now at the door. I put him down with a rapid-fire burst. That was it. A living stalker threw the door closed, and let out a cursing war cry. "Fucking zombies!" was the only part I heard clearly. Zombies was the right name for them. The one I had killed first was lying right there, half on top of Champ. Champ and Boa crawled to the wall and halfway up it. Ro and I were fine, only because the other stalkers had soaked up the bullets. and I suppose Roe wasn't all that fine, fighting shakes and trying not to look at the mess. Dumpling was dead. 3 others were dead, or thereabouts. The rest had treatable wounds, requiring a trip back to Clear Sky headquarters. They were forced to let Roe and I carry them that way, so our ticket in was secured. No one wanted to talk to us about what the hell had just happened. I returned that AN-94 to Bush, the wounded original owner. He said to keep it for helping out. In return, Rose scooped up the AK-74 a zombie had been carrying and offered it up as a trade. Bush seemed angry at the offer, then accepted it anyway. I didn't truly appreciate zone economics. The rule was the first one to touch a fallen weapon was the new owner, and Roe had effectively diluted Bush's honourable gesture by returning a gift so immediately. Who cares was Roe's later evaluation of this. Stalkers cared, because honour was the only religion left in the zone. Champ and Boa helped apply bandages, doing so with professional efficiency. They were bitter, implying with their teeth-grit mumbling that Clear Sky had known this would happen. The event, the Emission as they called it, began to calm. The lights dimmed, and the sensation of shaking dampened, and the feeling of your skull being too tight for your brain ceased. Bush insisted that Champ and Boa set up their gear and take some readings. They did so, fears now completely replaced by fury. The readings satisfied Bush, and he opened the door. The other stalkers helped him throw the zombie bodies into the swamp. There were a few more of them out on the decking and roof. "That's what happens when you make friends with the aliens," Bush told me once it was done. That was all the explanation the Clear Sky guys felt like giving. It was enough. We left the dead stalkers behind to be collected later. Roe thought they might turn into zombies too. No one else seemed to think so, and I told Roe to grab the magazines for our new gun. The 550 was now useless on account of chambering 45mm, whereas everyone here used the cheaper 39mm cartridges. It was still a good hunk of gun nut currency, one that would pay our way in the hours to come. And the AN-94 assault rifle, despite being made of parts that were both easy to break and expensive to manufacture, was a stylish choice itself. 2-round recoil-delayed burst, clips for underslung accessories and scopes, and a big boomerang of a magazine. This one had even stopped a bullet in the wood of its foregrip long ago. I wished it a pleasant next chapter of its life with us, or me specifically. Concentrating on that calmed my nerves, although keeping them on alert was granting a nice reprieve from the bloodsucker pain. Roe told me they'd come up with a way to get to sleep after all of this, somehow. The dismal march of those who happened to be alive brought us all to a cluster of smashed-up farmhouses. A squad of Clear Sky stalkers, fully masked and dressed in blue, were there to receive us and carry the wounded on. They were eager to blame either Champ and Boa or me and Roe for all of this. "You're supposed to clear every direction when the emission warning goes out," someone screamed at Bush. "It's not that simple," Bush replied easily, ignoring the tension. Both sides were under differing effects of vodka, as was I. Not just for the fun of it, but because drinking a shot or two helped purge the body of the toxic effects of the swamp. So they said. Roe had none of it, as usual. From the destroyed buildings, we were taken through a thick, bushy avenue of high ground to a hamlet, completely obscured by the healthy-looking trees around it. We must have been right on the edge of the zone, about as far as we could be from where we'd intended to end up by day's end, and ending the day was. Beside the wooden buildings were around 20 Clear Sky stalkers, cooking meat on fires, all in those blue uniforms, in varying states of repair. Some had oversized armoured vests with bulging pockets. Most wore balaclavas or masks. Champ, Boa, Roe and I made for a colourful quartet among them. Champ and Boa still didn't remove their helmets though. They took their equipment into one of the buildings, and the Clear Sky escort delivered the bad news to the rest of them. Amid sour moods and disputes, Bush told us to go sit at the bar. A very agreeable instruction. It was an open-air thing with a deck and a bunch of poorly made tables. A friendly guy with an American accent brought us big tins of unspecified meat. Surely it was manufactured outside of the zone? We ate it up, not really noticing if it tasted good or bad. I was thinking about what I could have done differently there in that crane station, and anything I said to Ro about it got the same reply: stop thinking about it. This time, Ro was right, though I carried on stewing myself into oblivion anyway. The cycle broke when a young guy with no headgear appeared, same uniform as the rest, albeit cleaner. He called himself Cold. He was the leader. He took us into his office in the largest of the houses. Inside it was properly decorated, lots of blue, and serviced by electricity. It was warm, and computers were running in various corners. They had off-spec machines with a medical vibe, produced, I judged, by extremely skilled technicians working with salvaged parts. There were places in the world you'd see these sorts of machines, for one reason or another. Cold sat us down in front of a wooden desk, like we were about to be asked about the gaps in our resumes. Ro's gap was particularly hard to explain. Fortunately, this narrow-faced boss wanted us to write stuff down about what happened at the crane station. It felt strange to write that zombies were to blame. Cold explained at last that these zombies were pests of the zone, created from those who didn't have the good sense to die when things went wrong. "We call this threat psi energy," Cold explained. "It can be anywhere. Much worse closer to the power plant. There are places even in this swamp where you can hear things call to you." I mentioned the tunnel where my vision turned blue, and Ro had felt headaches. Cold said he'd like to visit it. "It can be made safe in various ways. We still have work to do there, since it didn't work so well. Being ready to kill yourself is the best defense. You probably think I'm joking." I didn't. Once our stories were confirmed, the page we'd written up was neatly filed away. Then he asked what we were doing here in the first place. Ro, mercifully, acquiesced to my strategy on this, probably only out of fatigue. I said we were new to the zone and wanted to know more about it. That was true enough. I explained our encounter with the Institute of Extraterrestrial Cultures. We told them there would be an emission. Cold nodded at us with lawyerly composure. "You're researching these kinds of things?" I asked. "The zone, yes. The IEC are more about the aliens. But as you've probably noticed already, they aren't here." "We saw aliens," Ro piped up. "No, you saw the zone," Cold insisted. "We wanted to see more of it," I said. I had no idea what I was meant to say, other than to somehow get some beans spilled that would get us back on track. "You want work?" Cold said. "We don't sell artifacts, not usually, so the money isn't great. However, we can give you some of the equipment. We have plenty to spare." Cold glanced at the photograph on his desk. I couldn't see it, and didn't need to. "You've been exploring the zone for a long time, right?" I asked. "Right," Cold said, snapping back to me. "And we pay the price, simply less than others." "Have you been to the power plant?" Ro asked. "Yes, I have. We used to try and go there quite often. It was very hard to return." "I heard rumours about that place," I said strategically. "They are our rumours," he said, with a thumb pointing to his chest. "Clear sky. We were the only group with any hope of understanding that place, and we failed, and paid the zone's price." "Dead?" Ro said, stupidly. "No," was Cold's surprise answer, at which point he lost his taste for speaking to us for the time being. Still, we seemed to get the job, in as far as we weren't asked to leave their property. Rather, we were told to work on further patrols planned all around the swamp. They could offer food and a drafty barracks in exchange. It wasn't where Ro or I wanted to be, although I managed to convince the former that it was where we needed to be. One day in the zone was enough to know that surviving the second day in the zone is the only thing outsiders can hope to achieve. We were getting stink-eye from the Clear Sky boys. It must have seemed that we had something to do with the attack. That paper trail we'd laid in the office was bearing the weight of impromptu justice, the only kind of justice in the zone. We didn't ask for any of the food and kept to ourselves, aside from a trip to the camp doctor. He waved something wrapped in a towel over my chest. It felt better immediately and stopped bleeding. An artifact, and a bloody useful one. The doctor returned to a game on his computer, still without even introducing himself, and asked for no payment at all. Perhaps he too had that civic responsibility of the old-timers. Feeling light as air, I led Ro in a warm-down stroll around the various sheds and old houses. There was a mutant dog tied up by a fence that barked endlessly at Ro until we went away. Later we learned it was called a Psy-Dog, a dog that knew things we couldn't. Being barked at was a bad sign. "We could die working for them, not even for us," Ro complained in the dim barracks that night. "There are people who know the interior. They won't give us that knowledge for free," I argued. "We need something to go on. It's as dangerous as Zedric said." "Yeah, it is. How many people did we kill today?" "The amount that got us here, and here is the place that gets us there. Can you understand that?" "Of course I can understand it. Doesn't make it true, does it?" "Or false." "That's not good enough." "That's easily good enough, come on. These guys have done some of the dying for us, haven't they?" "You're not meant to think about it like that." "Yeah, well, that's how it is. And we've got to reap something. For us, that's what this is about." "You're the one saying that to me." "'Cause we want the same thing, Ro. This is the way to get it. You know that." "Ah, then if I know it, while you obviously are just guessing, doesn't that make me the more intelligent decision-maker here?" "Don't think that's even possible." "You killed a man. How many? Remember?" "Good night, Ro." "You can even think about sleep?" "Yeah." After a while, I said, "Ro, it will get easier. Then we'll win. Got it?" "Whatever you want," was the moody reply. It's hard to explain how I knew it from that, but Ro agreed with me. From the furthest doldrum swamp to the leftover sorcery of this universe's itinerant masters, we had a long road ahead, which was infinitely better than no road at all. I knew I would have to kill again. It didn't matter. It would all wash away at the Wishgranter. Business started long ago could finally be ended, as Ro and I had been discussing ever since we first met. It's hard to explain how easy it was to forget everything but this one end goal. I knew to remain strong, though. There was a lot that should not be forgotten on this road.